All right, people are coming in. We're just going to wait a little bit. So exciting to have participants and really looking forward to everybody's thoughts and questions. This is great. We're good to start.
All right.
All right. I want to welcome everybody. Good evening. My name is Paula Vogel, and I am the founder of Bard at the Gate and the co-curator with Nicole A. Watson. And my thanks to everyone at the McCarter Theater who has co-produced Sonnets for an Old Century. It is an incredible pleasure for me tonight. I just want to give a brief introduction to our playwright and director. Okay, this is where I have to say all of the artists on screen other than me are multi-talented. And when there is a brilliant, brilliant playwright who's also a brilliant director, I take it personally. Okay, so José Rivera has written over 33 plays, television, and screenplays. So for all of us who are there out in the audience, for all of us who are thinking, I don't know, I don't feel like writing today, just remember that, 33. His works include Marisol, Cloud Tectonics, Boleros for the Disenchanted, references to Salvador Dali, Make Me Hot, screenplay for the Motorcycle Diaries. His awards include the nomination for the Oscar for Best Screenplay Adaptation, 2 Obies, a Kennedy Center for New American Plays, a Fulbright, a Whiting Award, a McKnight, and the Norman Lear Writing Award. One of my really great honors this year is that Jose gave me the first script to a new play, a wonderful two-hander called Your Name Means Dream, which I believe is going to have a reading very soon at the Goodman Theater. So what I just want to say that, you know, Bard at the Gate is concerned with bringing really extraordinary theater into classrooms, into libraries, into living rooms. And one of the things that I'm mindful about is that I'm aware that there are new generations who perhaps are concentrating still on Death of a Salesman. There's nothing wrong with Death of a Salesman. But I want to make sure that we are not careless with our genius artists and that we learn to love them and read them early in our careers. I was fortunate to see Marisol at its first production, and it completely rocked me. It changed my writing DNA. Because what Jose showed me was that in the midst of chaos and carnage, a writer needs to have the courage and the honesty to find the beauty. All of his plays for me feel prescient. I also want to remark that his essays have been critical in teaching. I have been handing out 36 assumptions about playwriting along with his plays like candy to generations of playwrights, and they have told me of his impact as well. We want to make sure that his impact continues and continues and continues. The other thing that I want to say here is that I'm going to ask the artists to introduce themselves, but as you look at their faces, you will recognize them. We have this extraordinary cast and company whose work encompasses everything from Broadway to off-Broadway, to television, to film. You've seen their work in so many extraordinary episodic narratives. And not only that, they're filmmakers, they're directors, they're dancers. They run the entire gamut, they're playwrights. This is what it means to be in theater in the 21st century. To embrace that. And so it's with extraordinary pride also that we get to capture them on this new medium called digital theater tonight. So without further ado, there's Jose Rivera. May I ask please that the company introduce themselves so we can imprint ourselves and attach the names to the faces that we know.
Isabel.
Ladies.
Hi, I'll start. My name is Isabel Arraiza.
Thank you, Isabel.
Hi, I'm Sara Koviak.
Hello, I'm Danielle Davenport.
My name is Felix Solis.
I'm María del Sol.
Fantastic. And I am hoping that everybody who is among the webinar has had the chance to see Sonnets for an Old Century and to see the extraordinary transformation that this company does. Unfortunately, we will not be joined by the brilliant MichaelJohn McGann and Joél Pérez. They're not able to be with us. So I'm going to dive in here and we're going to just start a conversation and then we will open it up to your questions and your thoughts on sonnets and also the bulk of work that these artists are representing on our screen. So the first thing I want to ask Jose, I was reading something about the impetus for cloud tectonics, that you saw a pregnant woman in the rain and that led to the play Cloud Tectonics. May I ask, what was the impetus for Sonnets?
First of all, I have to say that being introduced by Paula Vogel has got to be one of the highlights of my life, okay? Let me just put that out there, point blank. Yeah, so sonnets, you know, I had, like a lot of kids growing up in New York, you know, went to public school and got, you know, an education in sort of European literature and classic American literature. And one of the things I read very early in life was Edgar Lee Masters' Spoon River Anthology. And which I love as literature and like a lot less as theater. I saw production and I was like, what the hell? And so I thought, you know what, I want to try that. I want to try my version of Spoon River Anthology. You know, for those who don't know, Spoon River is basically, you know, the DNA of a cemetery. A group of people in a cemetery in this little town called Spoon River get to have their say, and usually short poems. And some of them are beautiful. But I thought, as theater, it wasn't, you know, it lacked variety for me. All the voices sound kind of the same. It was the same sort of demographic of, you know, of the population. So it was 1999, the new century was coming, and I thought I really wanted to write something that commemorated what I felt were the most important currents in life at that time, right before the new century, which is why it's called Sonnets for an Old Century, as opposed to the new century, because I didn't know what the new one was going to be. So that was the impetus. So the stage play actually has more than 30 monologues. And when it had its world premiere in Los Angeles, we did all 30. And the play ran about 2.5 hours. And the LA Times said it was 2 hours too long. And so it didn't do well, but, you know, it was a great experience and I had a wonderful time with the cast. Yes, that's how it began.
You've just made me so happy because I've been describing this as a different kind of Spoon River Anthology. I really have.
Okay.
So that's amazing. You know, this is just my personal response and why I hold your work so dear. I don't think I've ever encountered a writer who loves people as much as you do, who finds an interconnection between people the way you do. And it actually, I think, takes a lot of courage to show love and beauty in that way. You're not afraid of going into the dark of this country, the dark of the human condition. Where do you get that courage?
I mean, everything I know about writing, I learned sitting around the kitchen table with my mom and her parents when they moved to Long Island from Puerto Rico. And, you know, my grandparents were not literate people. They could not read or write. I once had to witness my grandfather signing a document with an X. So that's, you know, but they were great storytellers. And my mother especially was so, she could entertain a room full of people for hours. And so everything I know about the craft of storytelling, I learned that way. Because I didn't, yeah, I've never really taken a writing class. I didn't go to graduate school. So everything came from that family situation.
Right. Have you ever found or tried writing something where you couldn't connect to the character, where you couldn't find the empathy?
That's a great question. I don't think so. I mean, I've had to, you know, I write plays because I love theater and I love, you can't stop me from writing a play. I write movies because they pay me. So many times in my movie life, I've had assignments for people I didn't connect with or didn't know. But eventually I find some connection. You know, I wrote the film about the Chilean miners who were trapped, you know, underground for 72
Yes.
days.
Yes.
And, you know, I went to Chile and I met them and I played soccer with their kids and had meals in their homes. And, you know, eventually they stopped being strangers. And so I don't, nope. I once wrote a short play about Manuel Noriega, the old, you know, who's like not the nicest man, but I even connected with him, you know. So I haven't yet. I haven't been stumped by a personality yet.
I just need to say that I feel right now we need to read more and more of your plays, because it feels to me like your plays are antidotes to the division that's occurring. And to enter a Rivera play world is to feel that connection. So another question, and actually I'd kind of like to open this all up, because it seems to me that all of us are doing a juggling act to pay the rent. American theater is stuck in some strange model that bears no resemblance to the way we pay the rent, the way we may have to raise children, the way we may have to take care of our parents, right? And so in this juggling act, and I know that everyone here is doing that form of juggling act, it's teaching, it's television, it's film. How do we stay artistically hungry?
Did we lose Paula?
And satisfy a different kind of hunger, I guess, is my question for everybody.
Well, I'll jump in. I'll jump in by saying that there is an unfortunate trap that we as artists and as actors fall into as we begin our careers. And the unfortunate trap is the jobs that we can take, which will allow us to continue to pursue our career, demand so much of us that when we finally achieve the moment in our career, we lose limbs. Because the limbs that we have conditioned our bodies and our minds and our spirits to do are bartender, waiter,
Right.
these jobs that are survival jobs that really give you the motivation and the impetus to do. And then you start getting paid and you no longer have to do that, and you lose a limb in a way that has to then be reinvented.
Right.
And so it feels to me like the ideal revolutionary thought would be to try and get a job that is as close to and as supportive of your art as an artist, as opposed to your life as a human being.
Right.
So that if you can get that teaching gig that is an artist teaching gig, or you can get something that works with children, or you can get something that allows you for it to not be an hourly clock in, clock out, menial fucking job that just keeps you going because that's what you need to pay the rent. Because I know it. I've seen many of us who have done that for so long. Then we start working as actors and we lose ourselves in a way. We lose a limb. We lose it. And it's like, why is that? What's going on? It's because for the better part of the last 10 years, I've been serving. I've been serving drinks. I've been doing this thing that has nothing to do with art.
Yeah.
So for me, the challenge I set forth to people is to try as hard as they possibly can to whatever it is that's paying your rent is also paying your art. You know, it's that it's somehow feeding your art as an artist as well, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I also feel, Jose, that's kind of a theme in your characters. This kind of divorce from the spiritual self, the erotic self, and this other existence that is a kind of amputation of the spirit. I mean, the thing that I love about these plays is that sonnets are for people who sit at the kitchen table, who are not going to Ivy League schools, who are not being paid to have a life of the mind. And yet you feel that grasp for the spirit, for the artist, for the life of the mind. I don't know how you respond to that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, if there was a sort of a common denominator in most of my work, is that virtually everybody is looking for home.
Yeah.
Whatever that home is defined as. In some cases, it's very clear, like in Cloud Tectonics and Muddy Soul, you know, there's a literal search for home in both. But even in Sonnets,
Yes.
wherever that place of rest or spiritual renewal or intellectual excitement is for each of these characters, they're yearning for that. And virtually every character in Sonnets is yearning deeply for that kind of thing. Before I go on, I just want to introduce María del Sol, who is our composer, not a member of the cast, and wrote some beautiful, beautiful music for this film. And just want to
Thank
acknowledge.
you. Thank you. And Maria, oh
Lord.
And I could not believe how emotion accumulates because of your score. I've also had the privilege to listen to some of your film work, and particularly, I think it's available on YouTube. There is an exquisite song that you wrote called Funeral for Past Lovers that won an award. Won awards. You won the Florence Film Festival Best Award for Original Score. So one of the things that I was kind of struck with is, how do you switch gears as a composer? You might argue that Sonnets itself has a musical score in the language. So to come in with the music that the actors are creating with their bodies and their words, and then to discover another layer, what kind of transition is that from writing from film, which is, I think, usually a little bit more imagistic, to responding to the words of actors?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here, and I'm honored to have worked in this film. I think it's a gorgeous film, and yes. First, it was very much informed by the words of Jose. We had a meeting and he told me about each monologue, what it meant for him, where it came from. And I got these keywords from him, and those very much informed the music, as well as in many cases, the performance of the actors. were amazing. And for example, Danielle's brain tumor very much informed the music, as well as Sarah's ex's. I mean, it was so inspirational to see their performance. So I just naturally translated that into music.
It works so beautifully. And were you as actors surprised in terms of the dimensions that appeared after Maria's score was laid in? I mean, how did that make you feel?
It was amazing. Like someone just wrote in, it was another character. It's like, you watch it and you have the beautiful background and you're into it, and then all of a sudden this other layer comes in, and it fully expands the whole environment of that monologue. So yeah, the music blew me away. It was so, for every single piece, it was just, and it swept you in, like it just kept pulling you. Yeah, had great momentum to it.
Yeah. Other folks, did you? Yeah.
I also felt like, it was such an incredible, rich dimension to add to it. And it really did. And there was a comment before as we were preparing for this about how really special and intentional this felt as a piece of digital theater, as we've all had different kinds of experiences with it. And for me, the music, the presence of the music was a really huge part of what sort of elevated and connected and brought an additional layer to this. That was really, really exciting.
Right.
And we've all gotten to actually like play together in a space and like be able to work on such a beautiful thing, to be able to see the way it all came together.
Didn't you guys feel though, like when I heard, I was like, oh my God. But then I was like, oh, I wish like I heard it when I was working on this, because I feel like it would have been a different conversation and would have brought things, and it was just so perfect. But I was curious to imagine what my journey as, rehearsing and working and trying to find the complexity and the truth in the word. I was like, oh my God, it makes so much sense with the music. And, we got to work together, but I gotta hear it while we're working. Cause I think like, I was just curious as to like what that journey would have been for me, because I was creating by myself, and I just thought like, oh, it's so good. I wish I had it like months ago. It was beautiful. Thank you, Maria. It was very, very moving.
Thank you so much. I think it's kind of like a circular thing, because the music can inform the performance, and the performance can inform the music. So yeah, maybe a collaboration where it all happens together would be interesting.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. Wynton Marsalis once said about music, he said, it's the only art form you can't see, right? Music is not visual. You can't see it. Sure, you can read it on the page or whatever as it's written out on the note, but you don't see music. You can only hear it, right? And the fascination that I've had with scoring and visual mediums is that you watch something and it makes you say something, and it makes you want to play something and create something when you visually see something. But at the same time, there's also the idea that, like you said, like not a lot of us, Isabel, listen to music to prepare for characters. A lot of us kind of throw the headphones on, and we're in the closet in the green room getting our shit on, before we go up on stage and do our thing, right? And it's never, ironically, it's never, for me at least, it's never like, if I'm doing something like José's pieces that are beautiful and poetic and romantic and thought felt and all of the stuff of emotion, I'm listening to Public Enemy, I'm listening to Eminem, I'm listening to something that is not that, for some reason, I don't know why, but that sort of draws me. But the idea being that it is an interesting thing, because we do as artists also hear something and go, oh, we would be influenced by it. But what was for me was fascinating to watch is when I watched it for the first time, and then you hear the music come in and you go, this is again, because it's true, it's not visual, I'm feeling something now. Like Isabel said, all of a sudden you're feeling something, and it's an elevation to the already elevated, artwork. So,
You know, we had just a short anecdote. You know, Maria instinctively had a grasp on virtually all the pieces, and we had had minor discussions as to what I wanted in them. But there was one that was sort of like the one that MichaelJohn did, Apology, and Maria says, "What do you feel? What do you?" And I said, "Well, it's sort of like Motown, or like Marvin Gaye, or Inner City Blues. You know, those are the references I gave her." And you know, coming from Chile and being classically trained, it wasn't necessarily the references she was most at home with. But I have to say, what you created for that piece is one of my favorite pieces of the whole thing, because it sounds like a 70s urban movie, which is exactly what I had hoped for.
Thank you. Yeah, that one, I mean, I had an anecdote with that one. I had a hard time connecting with it because, yeah, Jose's reference was gangsters in New York from the 70s and Motown from the 70s. And I'm like, that's so foreign to me. How do I connect to it? And so I started listening to a lot of Motown from the 70s, and I was analyzing you know, how it works, what they use, how they use the instruments and all of this. And then I realized I was way too much in my head analyzing, and I felt like if I compose from there, it's just gonna sound like a fake, pale imitation of the real thing, and I didn't want that. So I realized I had to get out of my head and connect with it emotionally. And it was hard. But at some point when I was trying to do that, all of a sudden this image popped in my head, and it was an image of an experience that I had one night in Miami, coming out of a jazz club. I was walking down the street to my car with a friend of mine. It was, you know, at night, a lonely, dark street. All of a sudden, I feel somebody pulls my purse, and I look up and I see a gun aim at my head. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's the feeling. That's the feeling that I need. That's how I connected to the piece. And from there, the music just flowed.
Yeah. There's something that I just want to give you as a kind of response to the piece, and it's almost like a witchcraft. And you know, Felix was talking earlier about, you know, what is this new form? But it actually feels, Maria, that you were in the room with everybody, and it feels like everybody in the cast is part of a company, present and listening to each other, and kind of emotionally navigating from each previous monologue. Now that has to do, first of all, with just the tempo and the incredible ways that you change mood and the emotional point of view, Jose. But a lot of this also, I think, is something in your directing in this. But it feels very strange. I feel that I saw an ensemble in the same space, and that we were all sharing process. I was watching a kind of shared process. It's almost impossible to articulate. I don't know if you were feeling that as you were directing each individual piece, if you were trying to carry through,
Well,
you know.
The paradox of this production is that in terms of physical parameters, there was very little freedom. The camera couldn't move. We couldn't light it like you light a film. The actors were stationary. So virtually as a piece of physical art, it had enormous limitations. However, you and the other producers gave me absolute artistic freedom. So I felt incredibly free, first of all, to cast it the way I wanted, and then to direct it the way I wanted. And I think part of that ensemble feeling is the fact that every single person up here, every actor, Felix, Sara, Isabel, and Danielle, we have worked together. We have done plays together. We have done readings and workshops, and we're like old veterans of each other. And I think that went a long way to creating that ensemble feeling that you're talking about.
Yeah. There's also something kind of remarkable in terms of what Maria's story is, but I don't think your work shies away from trauma. And I feel in many of these stories, I'm watching characters navigate the trauma at this hour of whatever it is, summation, and to try and find and articulate a peace, of forgiveness, an endpoint with the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I also think the music just helps so much. This is a layperson's. I'm a layperson when it comes to acting, as you can all tell. But one of the things that I think is so magnificent about this work, and one of the amazing gifts that you give actors, is my ability to watch the whole spectrum of an actor's gifts, rather than the continuity of one character. The ability to see people cast off skins and, different characters. And I just have to ask you, Danielle, tracking you, from the smog in LA to the brain tumor. These were such different, separate individualities that you just landed. What was that like for you? And how do you do that?
I think for me, it all starts with the words. I just think that these sonnets are all so gorgeous and so specific, and the imagery was, I just felt like if I just looked at the pictures in my mind, that each of the words, like each of the lines painted, it just sort of took care of itself. I mean, it was, for us to have the day that we had to shoot it and to do like costume and makeup changes, that kind of helps visually. But otherwise, we had like a short bit of rehearsal time, each of us individually, and we're able to kind of dig in and ask some questions, and think about who these people were and where they'd come from, and what this moment of like sort of last hurrah, sharing what you have to share. And yeah, it was fun to just kind of dig into the language and follow that.
Yeah, I just got to tell you, you're going to remain in my head for probably the rest of my life. I'm like, I have seen a brain tumor. I have, you have created, I have empathized, I've gotten into the inside of a brain tumor. That's just remarkable. I mean, I think in every single monologue, there's something impossible.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody carries through. And I just go with it. Okay, Felix, yes, you're jumping off a tower. You are absolutely flying.
Do you ever notice how they say that acting is the only thing you cannot do, the only art form you cannot do alone?
Yeah.
You can write by yourself, you can paint by yourself, you can play music by yourself, you can dance by yourself, you can sing by yourself. You can't act by yourself. And it's, I get pushback when I bring this up, only because they're like, well, yeah, but the monologue, right? But I'm bringing it up because we were doing monologues, right? For all intents and purposes. But there was something just interesting and challenging about that, is that it's the only art form you can't do by yourself. You're talking to someone. You're saying something to some person. So there's another person, whether they're on stage, not on stage, on camera, not on camera, you're still talking to someone. You're doing something to the other person that you're talking to. So there isn't a solitude to it. There isn't a singularity to it, right? But it is interesting, because then that's the sort of the way that these things came together, in a way that you were being spoken to, and not not just sitting back and listening, but you were being spoken to,
Yeah.
No.
Something else that I just want to put in here. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that these, as to whether or not these are monologues or soliloquies, or direct audience address. I feel like, Jose, you've got a kind of mixture in here. But one thing I really want to tell you as a woman playwright is that I feel your actors and your words have created so many layers of longing. And there's a longing in terms of the parent-child dynamic in this that causes me to stop and think, okay, in my last moment, how do I find, either forgiveness or the end note for this dynamic that's followed through my life? And the thing that I absolutely love is how much you love women. It's extraordinary how much you love women and how layered and complicated and beautiful the dynamics are between mothers and their children. Fathers and their children, I mean, particularly, with Icarus and Michael John's monologues, and some of the monologues that weren't presented are an interesting, complicated thing. But there seems something almost elemental, when you're talking about sending your daughter, Danielle, to school, when you're talking, Sarah, about listening to your mother read the book, right? When, Isabel, you're being drawn to something that's taking you away from your mother and the house, that there's a force that's greater than that. And I don't have a question about this, but just that I feel it's extraordinary. I have to say, I think the playwright that I think of so often with gratitude in terms of his love for women is Tennessee Williams. But I feel gratitude to you for the way that you show us women in both daughter, mother, and the position of lovers in your plays and in this piece. So I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that. And how you do that, God bless. God bless, because one of the things that I'm feeling in an old century is that so many rich characters have been reduced into stereotypes by a dominant white culture. And that I feel that Sonnets brings fully fleshed these characters that have not been paid adequate attention to, if that makes any sense. I don't know if any of you were feeling that as you're performing these characters.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's something that we mentioned before where you said, everyone, a lot of Jose's characters come from, they're just sitting at the table, they're just trying to make their ends meet. I think about Anibal,
Yeah.
in Cloud, he's a baggage handler at LAX, you know what I mean? He's just a working class guy, and the beauty is that, and is sort of referencing what we talked about earlier about what kind of job you want to have as you're supporting your career as an artist. But like, it's the fact that something, for lack of a better word, strikes him that has nothing to do with logical work at a LAX picking up baggages is something magical that happens, and it occurs, and that's I think that's part of what you're talking about, is this idea that you can push past the norm, push past the natural, push past all of that and go into it. I will also say though too that and it's clear that when Jose said earlier that his mother taught him how to write, I mean, that's, my mother taught me how to act, because I just sat and watched my mother behave and go, oh, that's humanity, and that's compassion, and that's interest, and that's judgment, and that's, all of these things, and just a simple observation of it. But I think you hit the nail right on the head, Paula, that he's got a mastery for the female voice in a way that not very many playwrights of our generation have, and we're lucky to have that,
Yeah.
We're lucky to have that. Yeah.
Other thoughts on this, Danielle?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, for me, the diversity, like, I feel like the three women I played were like each hugely different and each like hugely dimensional, you know, like there's so much to each of them. The fact that, you know, among the sonnets that were in this version of it and then all of the rest too, there's just like such an infinite range of humanity. And to me, that's what it really comes down to. I feel like there's so many situations in our culture where women are like reduced to things other than our full humanity. And I feel like in José's writing, there's really the opportunity for fullness in a way that so often gets squashed otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, I'm gonna open this up because I think we want to just open up the party. So with that in mind, may I ask a first question of everybody? This is for the actors. Would anyone be willing to share the imagery in José's words that had the most impact on your acting? Sarah,
When
please.
when I read anything he writes, there's such a rhythm to it, and I'm a dancer and choreographer, so I see it as like musical notes, literally. I see the words, so I see where things get like lifted and cut and then merge, and then it goes and then it chops, and then so I see it all like that. So the imagery for me is more like a traveling pattern, but it has definite stops and beats and rests and breaths, and it's so specific, and I get it and I see it so clearly. So I think that's why I understand it, you know, right off the bat. Well, a lot of work, but yeah. So, and the imagery is so fanciful that like you kind of get swept up with it. I don't know. I see things as well, so I kind of travel with it. Yeah, it's a journey, and it needs stamina and intense concentration, but you get there.
Yeah. Isabel, is there something particular for you that was an image that kind of gave you an anchor as a starting point?
Like a specific image from the monologue or just in general?
From a monologue, I think was the question.
You know what was so interesting is that sometimes when I work with José, I was like, this is so José, like this is so unbelievable. Like what? And then it always comes from like a real story, like the story that I did, the monologue of the José. Is that okay if I share it? It's something that happened to his sister. And you know, what's interesting is like in his work, I always feel like as a Puerto Rican woman in this country, I've never read a piece of literature or theater that I feel like we've been able to grasp what magic realism is. And I think José is the only writer that I've seen that he can accomplish that through the work and through his words and the imagery. And what's interesting is that it's so big sometimes, and they're so powerful, these images, but there's so much truth. And when you go to the core of it, it's usually based on something that he's gone through, right? And so, but to me, I think the image of just the swirling eye and just being the image of the trees just bending into one direction, pointing into that, that was, you know, I have many stories that if I take it out of context, like of things growing up in Puerto Rico, if I tell them now, they're going to be like, that's crazy. And when I read that, I thought, oh, this makes sense. I know what he's talking about. So that was definitely like that monologue specifically was very difficult for me. There's many things I want to say because we were talking before about, you know, the characters in this journey, you know, kind of, we can say redeeming themselves or kind of confessing or putting like an end to the cycle of trauma, right? It could be, I made it kind of like a court of angels, and I motivated each of my characters to say this to, you know, a court of angels to maybe go to the next level. I was brought up Catholic, so I was thinking I was in limbo, right? But what's interesting is like through the work, I had stopped doing theater like 7 years ago, and It was the first time that I was, working on this kind of text. And what was interesting is that while I was working with Jose, like I had this confession about why I stopped doing theater and why I was so afraid. And it was almost like I was also like finishing up the cycle of I don't want to call it trauma, but of anxiety, like through the work and kind of working through it and finding my voice in this work, which seemed at the beginning impossible for me to memorize. And all of a sudden I started connecting to those images and to the truth of it. And it's just a wonderful exercise for any actor, I think.
Yeah, this work so loves actors, so loves the individual voice. And yeah, I want to get 10% of every copy sold to Sonnets for auditions, because no one's going to find a better audition piece than something in Sonnets. It's just so rich. Yeah.
Paula, part of my challenge as a writer is to make it as hard as possible. In the 32 assumptions, one of them is always write an impossible thing. But, I like, we'll just talk about the X monologue, for instance, which is incredibly long, incredibly detailed, and Sarah made it incredibly physical. I just wanted to make that monologue as hard for an actor to perform as possible. Sarah did a beautiful job, but, it is part of my job is to like push actors to their limits.
Right.
When I wrote María del Sol, I said, I'm going to make this the hardest damn thing this woman will ever do. And, because I keep thinking as a writer, part of my job is to like make it exciting for the actor to wake up that morning and run to rehearsal because they can't wait for the challenge, and I've read so many plays and seen so much TV where like the roles are just they're not worthy. They're not worthy of the people who are cast.
Can I just say that I had to call half of my MFA professors, okay, to tackle this work with Earthquake. I called my Juilliard folks. I was like, I have to do José Rivera. And I was like, okay. I called my Alexander teacher. I was like, this is a challenge. And I had 2 short pieces, but that long one, it was like playing the piano, right? And I was like, okay, you have to hit the notes and you got to move swiftly. And how do you create the images and how do you lift it? And that's the kind of work that it is very exciting to do and that I hadn't done in a while. So I hired an army to help me to kind of reconnect, but it was incredibly rich and healing. And so thank you for that. Just wanted to add to what you were saying.
No, that's fantastic. Other thoughts on this in terms of the challenge? Or Danielle, yeah.
I was going to say, I love hearing what you were just saying, Isabel, about this process bringing up like deep stuff in your relationship to theater, because I found when I pulled that, Sonnets is published with references to Salvador Dali, Make Me Hot. And when I was like, on the circuit doing the EPAs, like signing up so I could do, all of those things, like that was the monologue, that was sort of the first monologue, one from that play that I used and like at the very sort of beginning of this journey. So to revisit that book, rereading the play and dig into this process now was definitely like a kind of full circle moment that felt really, it's just beautiful. And then I think as far as the images, just that red sky, I've told Jose, like air pollution comes back since we've done this. I just feel like air pollution pops up for so very many reasons. It pops to mind all the time. And just like all of the reds in that sky and just sort of the spatial relationships and like, on the 11th floor of the building and Los Feliz is here from here and the traffic was this long for this distance. There's such a mapping to it that just for me, it was like following the journey of it and then just like the awe of that sky. That stays with me for sure.
Lovely. I'm gonna read another question here, Jose. Is there anything about working in this format that you love enough to use it again. And I'm assuming this format is digital theater. I'm interested in what will be the new ways theater writers work and the environments they imagine for their creation. So delighted for you.
Yeah, I think I would absolutely work in this form again. I mean, one of the things that I really wanted to do was to marry theater and film, because I had been directing short films and learned a great deal, especially about the use of music in the storytelling process. So when Sonnets came up, I was determined that it would be some kind of hybrid between, you know, theater as this explosive emotional world and film as this like aesthetically pleasing and beautiful creation. So I would definitely do that kind of work again.
Great, great. I'm just going to put in a little plug here. We've extended free access to Sonnets for an old century via McCarter's website. If you've not seen the show yet, or you want to share the performance with your friends, and trust me, you're going to want to share the performance, please visit the link below, and it's in the chat. Help us celebrate and lift the brilliant work of Jose, Maria, Isabel, Danielle, Sarah, Felix. So please check the chat for that link, and please tell your friends here. Guys,
Oops.
to answer right now, but I want to know what stories you need to tell or that you haven't told yet, but you need to tell. I know you've got a new play. I know you probably got, listening to your process and reading about your process, you probably got them all stacked up, but is there some kind of dream story that you tell yourself one day?
Well, I mean, I do. I really like short forms, like, you know, sonnets are short monologues, right? You know, in my checkered television past, I created a show called Erie, Indiana, which was a kind of teenage Twilight Zone. And I have a ton of stories for something in that form, you know, little things that, you know, as an example, a family puts up a yellow ribbon in front of their house. You know, when we were at the Persian Gulf War, people put yellow ribbons, you know, to show their patriotism. And so in my story, somebody puts a yellow ribbon in front of the house, and it brings the ghosts of all the dead soldiers from the Civil War, from the Revolutionary War and World War I to their home. So stories like that, you know, I definitely want to tell. I mean, the new play, which is about AI and aging, is definitely something that I'm very obsessed about at the moment, and excited to explore that. Yeah, I mean, I have more things I want to do than I have time, but you know, I'll get to as many things as possible, I think.
I'm hoping so. I mean, you know how when you first read a book that maybe your friends give you or your parents give you, and you weep when you get to the end because you'll never be able to start on page one again and discover that world. That's how I feel about your work. I just want to keep reading new Jose Rivera plays. And that's not to slight all the wonderful film and TV work you've done. What haven't I asked? And someone's saying, what do you hope the uninitiated find in your work? Is a question from someone who has just encountered your work with Sonnets. What would you say to someone who's never, like, picking up the book and finding page one? What do you hope the uninitiated find in your work?
I would say you're definitely not alone. Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. I do want people to connect with these characters that I create for a variety of reasons, to be able to see themselves in these characters, to, because as I said earlier, you know, most of these characters and a lot of my plays, characters are on journeys. And I really want, I want an audience, or I want a reader to like buy a passport and take the journey with the characters. Max Farah, who used to run Intar Theater, I don't know if you knew Max, you know, he used to
Yeah.
say that buying a
Love to.
ticket, yeah, I did too. Buying a
Yeah.
ticket to Intar was like buying is getting a passport to another world, and that I've always taken that to heart and wanted to, you know, create worlds with the possibility of entering them, participating in them, and rejoicing in them. And to me, that would be, you know, what I would love for any audience of mine to experience.
To take the journey. Great. I will just list on Twitter and Facebook just a kind of list of some of my favorite José Rivera plays. Everyone's extraordinary. Everyone's a different journey. And I think we're almost out of time. So I want to say to people on the panel, is there something that you want to be asked that I didn't ask, that we didn't discuss in this moment of time? Sarah?
I guess just really quick, we were talking about how Maria made the music based on what we performed. And it's so interesting because she had to orchestrate or choreograph her music onto us instead of us choreographing our performances onto her music. So it's just a different sequence of events. But, you know, this is how it went this time, and it was beautiful and gorgeous. And it's just, you know, you have to do one or the other. But yeah, either way, you can come at it from either direction. Yeah, just interesting.
I'd love to take a moment to I've never had a chance to say this to you, Paula. You are a pioneer in this world. You are someone who has taken on a world in a way that no one else could probably have ever done, have had the guts to do, and have succeeded at doing. And again, I'm gonna say you've done it again with projects like this, and for you to champion writers who don't, like Jose just said, aren't always heard. We know them because we know them, because we know them, because the universe was kind enough to put us in the same path. But you are also pioneering a lot of people to see this, and to see his work, and to see our work, and to see things that they weren't, you know, privileged to do. And that's something that I want to take my hat off to you for doing, because you are definitely someone who has not only carried the mantle, but lifted it exuberantly high for everyone in the world of theater. And you need to know that.
That's extraordinary of you. I have to tell you all, I mean, and I said this before, I get such stage fright when I'm in the presence of artists like all of you. And I'm so smitten. It's too painful for me to imagine a world where I can't see all of you on stage, and too painful to think of a new century where I don't have a new José Rivera play. And I know that this goes completely against whatever strange values, and I don't think there are values anymore, that's running this country right now. So, you know and I believe that I'm going to be able to see you all in a theater space again. I have to believe that. I also have to say that whatever this new form is that you created, you created this thing called Sonnets, And it feels like theater. And so, you know, I keep thinking of myself being a kid in a working class family that never had money for clothing. But then there, you know, all of those kids are going to be able to go to the library and see Sonnets and see your work and feel like they were in the room with you. And that's just extraordinary. I want to thank you so much. And I just know what a gift you've given us and what a gift you've given in the years to come with this beautiful, beautiful thing you've created. I'm going to just mention here that people can go to mccarter.org/bard, and you're going to have to fiddle around a little bit, but there's an extraordinary play there called How to Raise a Freeman by Zakiya Alexander. And it is driving me crazy that it wasn't produced, and this has to stop. It's extraordinary. And to tell you folks that next on the Bard season, we have Charles Francis Chan Jr.'s Exotic Oriental Murder Mystery by Lloyd Suh, and that will be on January 26th. And we will conclude this season with Passing by Dipika Guha on March 9th. This beautiful piece is going to be running all season long. Please, please pass this on so people have this in their memories. Always, always, always. And I just want to thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Take care. Till next we meet. Thank you, Felix. Thank you all. Thank you, Maria, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you,
What a
Paul.
privilege.